The Jackson Municipal Podcast Series. We have Kevin Parkinson Award 7. We're going to get into the first question. What life experiences have shaped the way you lead and make decisions?
Well, I was adopted at birth, and I was therefore brought into a very, very, very loving family. And my parents taught me from a very early age to give back and to help your neighbors and your community as much as possible. So, whenever I'm making decisions, I'm constantly making decisions in terms of what's best for our community and trying to lead in ways that my father and my late mother would, I know, be proud.
What was the last time you had to admit you were wrong about something, and how did you handle it?
So I think being an effective leader, you constantly have to humble yourself and realize when you were wrong or when you needed your thinking to evolve. As just one example, I previously, as a school leader, I wasn't necessarily a fan of teaching cursive. I thought that was too old school. There's other things we could be teaching. There's other things we could be doing, and we didn't need to worry about, that old school form of handwriting. But the more that I read into the research on it, I realized that it actually does a lot for brain development and our parents, the parents of the students that I was working with, really thought that it was important for students to learn cursive. And so I changed my mind. And so we went from not having cursive instruction at our school to we need to make sure that we add that in. And I think good, effective leaders do that constantly. And I will constantly humble myself to reflect and to see when we need to change course and when we need to maybe just evolve our thinking a little bit.
Who in your life has had the biggest impact on your values and the way you see the world?
So I try to take inspiration from everybody around me. I think that we can learn something from everybody, even if they're very different than us, even if we're in different positions or whatever. I think you can constantly learn from people around you. I think if I had to pick one person that I've probably learned the most from, it would probably be my father. He was born in Dublin, Ireland, and immigrated to the United States as a child and spent many years away from his family and had to create his own life here and has done an amazing job and is constantly thinking about how he can give back to his community. And I think I every day I try to channel that energy and try to think of what I've learned from him.
What's a challenge you faced that changed the way you approach problem solving?
Being an educator is an enormous challenge, and every job in education I've ever had has had its own fair share of challenges. I would say something that changed, a challenge that changed me when I was a school leader is realizing that running a school is a complex problem. And no matter how many hours I was willing to work or how hard I was willing to push, you cannot create change on your own. Change is only possible when you connect groups of people and sort of work together. And when you're dealing with a large scale problem, community engagement and collaboration with others is the only way to make it happen.
If you weren't running for office, what's something you'd still be doing to help your community?
So I even as a citizen, I try to stay as engaged as I possibly can. So I make sure to stay on top of the latest news and sort of what's going on locally. I'm big into volunteerism, so I love community cleanups and things like that, and any opportunity to work with kids. That's my favorite opportunity, just as an educator. Love working with students of all ages, and I think there's lots of ways that we can get engaged, even small things like taking the trash in for your neighbors or mowing their grass or doing what you can for the people around us. I think are ways to give back to the community.
What inspired you to run for city council, and what's the first issue you want to tackle if elected?
Those are good questions. So I am the former principal of Midtown Public Charter School, and by the nature of that school, we can serve students from all over the city. You don't have to come from one particular neighborhood in order to go to that school. And so we had students from all over. And when you would do home visits or when you would go to community events, I had the opportunity to go to North Jackson, South Jackson, East Jackson, West Jackson, Central Jackson, all over. And I can tell you that every single neighborhood in Jackson has something truly amazing and is special in its own right. And each neighborhood is facing challenges. And some of the challenges are beyond our control, but some of the challenges are just a lack of leadership. And I know that if we step up and work together, we can address a lot of these challenges. We can continue all the things that make Jackson really, really special, and we can address some of these urgent challenges. You also asked what's the first sort of issue that I would work to address. And I'll say, when I was a school leader, the first thing that I did is I created data reporting mechanisms. And so you have to get I'm a numbers guy, and you have to get a sense of sort of where you're at so you can know where to improve. Otherwise, it's just vibes. It's just how is it feeling? And when I was a school leader, I know if you want to create change, vibes alone is not what's going to do it. And so we used to create monthly reports that had attendance data, academic data, behavior data, community engagement data, culture data, all kinds of measures, and we would collect those numbers every single month and analyze it as a school community. And we would look at, okay, how many suspensions did we have last month, and can we lower that this month? And what were test scores this month, and what can we do to raise those next month? And what I'll say is the city doesn't really have a good consistent data reporting mechanism. In theory, we have 311, but 311 is highly inconsistent. And so that, I think, is the first thing that I would want to address is let's get a good solid data reporting mechanism so then we can see how many people reported drainage issues last month, and can we lower that this month? How many people are calling in about potholes, and where can we lower the number of pothole complaints? So I think the reason that I'm running is because I think I want to make Jackson great for the entire city. I know we can really thrive collectively. And one of the first issues that I would tackle is a clear data reporting mechanism.
If you had to make tough budget decisions, how would you prioritize spending to make sure that the people of Jackson get the services they need?
Yeah, so this is in part you look at what could do the most good for the most number of people, and there are certain things like the 311 system that benefit the entire city collectively. And so I would prioritize areas that really benefit the entire city, and then you bring people together. Sometimes it's a matter of making tough choices, but sometimes you can get creative and you can stretch a dollar. We've all been in that situation where you can stretch a dollar and do more than one thing, and we have to look at problems creatively. And instead of saying should we do this or that, it's is there a way for us to do both of them?
How will you support the jobs and businesses that are already in Jackson?
Yeah, it's really hard to do business in Jackson, and we have to prioritize and make that easier. And one way is you just set a clear priority that one thing we're going to do as a city is we're going to make it easier to do business. And so we're not going to harass our business owners. We're not going to make red tape when that's not necessary. Of course, there are times for regulations. There are times for holding high standards of our business owners, but we have to recognize that our businesses are the lifeline of our city, and they're struggling. And so anything we could do to streamline their processes, streamline systems, and help them out whenever we can, I think we should take
What do you think the biggest challenges when it comes to crime and infrastructure in Jackson, and how do you plan to be a part of the solution?
Yeah, crime is just a complex problem. And so it needs to be addressed from a lot of different angles. There's not going to be one magic pill that we can swallow that completely eliminates crime. But there's a lot that we can do. We can look at preventative measures. What do we do to keep young folks engaged, for example, and how do we take efforts to try to prevent crime from happening in the first place? And then once crime does happen, how do we respond to it as quickly as possible to avoid retaliation and to avoid repeat things happening? I think crime happens for three reasons. Some people are desperate, some people are greedy, and there's sometimes crimes of opportunity. We can eliminate crimes of opportunity by, for example, increasing police presence, making it brighter, eliminating blight. Those are some things that we can do, and that would do a lot to reduce crime.
how will you stay connected with your community and make sure the people feel heard even after election season is over?
Oh, that's when it's most important to engage people. Yeah, we have to meet people where they're at. I think some people can come to city hall meetings, and that's wonderful. But not everyone has 5 hours in the middle of a Tuesday to attend meetings, and so we have to reach those people either by social media, by hosting town halls at night. We have to send traditional mail letters home. We have to do email campaigns. We have to meet the citizens of Jackson where they're at.
What specific policies or ordinances do you plan to introduce or advocate for that will directly benefit the residents of Jackson, and how do you plan to gain support for them?
Yeah, so I'm prepared to listen to the citizens of Jackson and to advocate on their behalf. I think it's far more important that you have a council person who's willing to listen and connect with the experts and strategize than it is pushing his or her own agenda. And so I'm fully committed to partnering with the neighborhood associations of our ward, of individual citizens in our ward, and helping connect those folks to resources and to the expertise they need to push collectively our ward forward.
With the city's budget constraints, how do you plan to ensure that resources are allocated effectively while maintaining essential services and addressing community needs?
So the budgetary process is one of the most important jobs of a city council person, and so that is when you really have to collaborate with citizens and with other council people and the mayor and others to make sure that that you're keeping equity in mind. The other thing I'll say though is sometimes it's not for lack of resources. It's making sure that we are effectively managing the resources that we have. We received some money recently by Mr. Crudup and others in the state legislature to help address some of our problems. But if we don't draw that money down fast enough, we lose that money. And so sometimes, yes, it's we don't have enough resources. We have to advocate for more resources and make tough budgetary decisions. But sometimes it's we have the money that we need, and it's city council's job to hold the mayor accountable to making sure that we're executing on that, and we shouldn't be leaving a dime of money on the table once we get it.
What strategies will you implement to ensure transparency in your decision making?
Yeah, so I mean, I will fully comply with all financial reporting laws. I will fully comply with the Open Meetings Act, but that's just the floor. We can do a lot more. I believe it's important to reach people where they're at, and so we have to find ways to transparently share information so that everybody knows what's going on in city council, what's happening, and keeping people abreast of that information. And then not being afraid to admit when we mess up and when we get it wrong, and being able to clearly communicate to people how we're going to work to make it better. And the more people that you bring into the collaboration process, the more transparency you're going to have because your citizens will hold you accountable. They just have to have a seat at the table.
Mm. What is your vision for economic growth and job creation in Jackson?
So we can do a lot to make our neighborhoods development ready. And so that includes things like helping to eliminate blight and taking other efforts to ensure that new businesses, want to come in and move and thrive here.
How do you plan to address key issues such as crime reduction, infrastructure improvement, and overall public safety to enhance the quality of life for residents?
Yeah. There's a lot of great work already happening. We have to accelerate the great work. We have to make sure it's equitable across the entire ward. And we have to take on some of these urgent challenges that are addressing it. They're complex. There's not going to be one policy you put forward that completely eliminates crime, but you have to take a piecemeal approach. There's not going to be one policy that's going to completely solve all of our roads, but you have to work in partnership with the mayor, with state and federal officials to target different projects and to make sure they're moving the city along.
Kevin, is there anything that we didn't get to talk about that you want to leave with the people?
I think there's three things that I will say. The first is it's very important to select a council person who not only has good ideas and not only who is smart and who is kind, but also has the skills and experience to actually actualize those ideas. I think the second thing that I'll say is it's important to elect someone who knows what the job of city council actually is, because people make two mistakes when it comes to what does the city council actually do. Some people think that the city councilor is the king and queen of their ward, and they wave a magic wand and everything just happens, and that's not accurate. But other people say, well, we have a strong mayor system, so there's nothing we can do, and that's not right either. There is a particular job that the councilor has to do, and I know what that is. And so it's important to elect someone who knows what the role of counselor is. And the third is it's important to elect somebody who can work across lines of difference. Ward 7 is very diverse and very large geographically. There's people that spread very, very far apart. And then our city government is made up of all sorts of different people. And so it's important to elect someone who can work with all sorts of different types of people.
All right, thank you so much for coming, Kevin, and we're looking forward to seeing what comes out. You guys make sure you go out and vote April 1st. Thank you much.
Thank you.